the one, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only united with all the illuminated souls who formed the embodiment of the Master, the Spirit of guidance. Praise be to thee, most supreme God, omnipotent, omnipresent, all-pervading, the only being, who takes us in thy parental arms, raises us from the essence of the earth, thy deity to worship, to thee to live most
Vandaag of alleen?
Oh yeah, I was a little bit worried, that's why. Because of the price, 200 guilders each.
Ja. Ja.
Take your computer.
Yeah, not the first 3 months, but after the 3 months, I come back after 3 months in Holland.
Ja, en
I
erbij.
have a meeting with Kabir and 3 months ago. So I can listen.
Jenny maakt maar de voeding als je haar. Dan komt hij niet moeilijk op. Ja, ik wil wel even reageren. Dat ik
Oké,
Het is al mooi klein allemaal, hè?
mooi.
Is de zaal aardig vol?
Ja, ja.
Hoeveel schat jij?
100.
Ja, klein. Ja.
Towards the one, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who formed the embodiment of the Master, the Spirit of guidance. Praise be to thee, most supreme God, omnipotent, omnipresent, all-pervading, the only being, who takes us in thy parental arms, raises us from the essence of the earth, thy deity to worship, to thee to live in existence, most merciful and compassionate God, granted and Lord of the whole humanity, thee only we worship. Open our hearts towards thy beauty, illuminate our souls with divine light. O thou perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, all powerful Creator, sustainer, judge of the creations, Lord God of the east and of the west, of the ones above and below, of the seen and unseen beings, all
gezamenlijke bijeenkomst van de Moerids, van de Sufi-orde en Sufi-beweging. And very hearty welcome to your headline. We're delighted that you're here with us, that you will give this meditation this morning and also tomorrow speak again. Helaas kan Pir Zade Vilayat niet bij ons zijn. Om hele dringende reden is hij in het buitenland. Hij had erg graag hier bij deze bijeenkomst aanwezig willen zijn om te laten zien hoe deze twee grote Sufi-organisaties samenwerken voor hetzelfde doel, de verspreiding van de Sufi-boodschap. We zijn blij dat Moesje en Ratan hier zijn en beide ook aan dit programma actief deelnemen. Ik heb een paar huishoudelijke mededelingen.
Good morning. Goedemorgen. I'm so happy that we're able to share together about question Sufi order, Sufi movement. I don't feel very happy with all these differences. Ik ben heel blij dat wij tezamen de gelegenheid hebben om tezamen te komen. En ik ben natuurlijk, ik heb niet graag dat wij zijn verschillende organisaties. I call it the institutionalization of spirituality which divides us. De institutionalisation van geestelijkheid die ons apart houden. I won't be able to translate all that we're doing this morning in Dutch, I'm afraid. Spijt mij, ik zou graag niet de gelegenheid hebben. Ik spreek niet genoeg Hollands, zodat dat alles wat wij hebben te doen deze morgen in Hollands te spreken, te zeggen. Maar ik hoop dat u allen Engels verstaan. Ik probeer om een beetje langzaam niet vlug te spreken. Maar misschien na deze is het mogelijk dat iemand het voor u vertellen. We have been released an incredible treasure. It is the most powerful teaching ever. And it is the teaching for our time. It's a teaching, it's not an intellectual teaching, it's a teaching that transforms one's being. And which deals with the most essential quest of ideal people who are moved by an ideal. What are we doing with it? Well, spreading message, it's not a question of spreading ideas, no. If we are transformed by it, then it will speak for itself. And people will also want to be transformed. So it speaks for itself. In other words, all the words in the world won't help. So Moshe's teaching was experience. Now what I've done for this, these few hours that we share together is what I would say the foundation of the teaching of Hazrat Sinathan, the message of our time. It is not a seminar. It is, you can consider it as a retreat that we're sharing together. I'm not just reading texts which are chosen in a sequence or built up very systematically, all the essential points in Moshe, some of the essential points in Moshe teaching. but we must experience it instead of just listening to the words. And therefore they are wonderful themes of meditation. So what I hope to do is read you a sentence and then perhaps say a few words to get us into it, and then just experience it in yourself. There is a time in life when a passion is awakened in the soul, which gives the soul a longing for the unattainable, niet bereikbaar. So, a longing for the unattainable. As Pir says, the purpose of life is like the horizon. It's always further, so you can say, I'm enlightened, I have it in my pocket. It's always further. And it is that longing that makes heroes, that makes the alpinists, that makes great beings. It is longing to reach further. And if one does not do that, one is caught in what Buddha calls a samsaric wheel, just repeating itself, like when it becomes what they call in French petit bourgeois. Or then one can slip down into, I hope you young people will excuse me if I say heavy metal, or deprivation, free-for-all, vulgarity, and I would say crime and war and hatred, cruelty. That is the consequence of slipping down from one's ideal. So let's just ask ourselves, is that what I'm looking for? I know I can never attain it, but still, that's the most valuable thing in the world. And nothing compares with it. So ask yourself that. No, actually it's really asking ourselves, what is my purpose in life? What are my values in life? Am I pursuing those values, or have I forgotten them? So value is not something intellectual. It is something that involves your emotions very deeply. And so Moshe says, there's a stage at which, by touching a particular phase of existence, phase, what does a phase mean? A phase of existence. One feels raised above the limitations of life. So that's what it is. It's being raised beyond the limitations of life, instead of just being caught in those limitations. So it touches one's, I would say, the emotion of the soul rather than the emotion of the heart. And he said, at that moment of supreme exaltation, one is not only united with the source of all being, so in other words, somehow that unattainable is God, the source of all being. So one is not only united, that means to say that one is no more just limited in one's personal ego, psychological image, self-image, but somehow one is linking one's ego with the totality of which is a part. And then he says, but dissolved in it, for one discovers that the source of one's very self is oneself. It's not like God up there and man down here. That's the message of our time. It's not the old-fashioned idea of God up there. In you, in us. So we're dissolved in it because we realize that that is our true being. That is the transcendental dimension of our being. And then he says, what makes one think that God is in heaven is a natural impulse in man, a divine impulse which gives him an inclination to rise. So somehow the thought of, yes, it's up there, well, he's not up there, but still somehow the thought of being lifted will help one to rise beyond the limitations of one's personal ego. And then Moshe describes what it's like. And you can really enter, actually, I find that when reading Pir Moshe's teaching, one has to really get into his consciousness. Like, in order to value a painting, you have to stand where the painter was painting. So to appreciate the full value of Moshe's teaching, you have to really get into what it would be like. How do things look from him? How do you feel if you were attuned to his attunement, in the same attunement, which is ecstasy? And so now he's saying how it feels like. Consciousness has become so light and so liberated that it can raise itself and dive and touch the depth of one's being. This desire is not acquired. This is a dim knowledge of the soul, which it has of itself. In other words, somehow just try to see if you dive deeply in yourself, you discover that in the depth of yourself there's a knowledge. In the depth of yourself there is a soul. And the soul is endowed with a knowledge which is not acquired. It's not acquired in life, it's there in the depth of your being. So you can't acquire it. It's uncovering what the Sufis call the secret treasure that desired to be known. I think it is a sense of the sacred and sense of the personal. So in other words, it's not a contempt for the world, but then that is something that can be added to the knowledge that you've been carrying in your soul. So this is not the way of the ascetic, it's the way of awakening in life, but not losing one's way. And he says, widening one's horizon, penetrating life in all its spheres, losing oneself and finding oneself in the end. Now, how does it change you? Well, for one thing, there comes a time when all that one has accepted in one's mind and one believed appears quite the contrary to what one thought. Yeah, one was so convinced, that one's assessment of one's problems was the way they are, and all of a sudden you realize it was wrong. And all this time I've been carrying this in my heart. It's not at all what I thought it was. All that he had believed appears quite the contrary to what had seemed before. Things that people take to heart will seem of little importance. And he finds that all his life he has given his thoughts to something which does not last, which does not even exist. That's freedom. Freedom from judgment. So Pir says what it's like, so can we just try and see what it would be like to be awakened, to be awake in life? Instead of samadhi, it's not samadhi, it's awakening in life. As I say, it's as though we were awake in the middle of the night amongst hundreds and thousands of people who are asleep. For one thing, one sees the unity and behind the diversity. Buried within man, one might say embedded. Embedded. So just see how it changes your meditation now. Instead of thinking of God up there, awakening the God within, awakening God within, who is embedded, who is latent, as we already came across this idea, a formation within our limited self. See the importance of prayer. Meditation as a preparation for prayer. Because this is where all that we've been doing, being talk about, comes into play. The Sufis sees the vision of God, the worshipped deity, in his immanence, manifest in nature and life, now becomes for him a perfect revelation, both within and without. The mystic does not think of God as an abstract, although he knows God to be so. It's not a question of knowing, but of being. It is not a question of knowing, but of being. God, for the mystic, is a stepping stone of self-realization. People ask, if all is God, then God is not a person. The answer, you see, this is very important because people think it's much easier just to think of God abstract out there somewhere. But he can't be a person, because how is it that things happen the way they do? So God can't be a person. Intervening in our destinies. And so Moshe's answer is very subtle. He said, if all is God, then people would ask, if all is God, then God is not a person. And the answer, though the seed does not show the flower in it, yet the seed culminates in the flower. And therefore the flower already existed in the seed. So that means that, imagine that you're a plant, and that God is the seed of that plant, and that seed is continually coming through as that plant. So God as a person becomes a person as you. No doubt it would be a great mistake to call God a personality, but it is a still greater mistake when man denies the personality of God. Man, in the flowering of his personality, expresses the personality of God. And now we come to a prayer. That's then we have our break. Then. See, one is never so uplifted. Let's say one is never so one's real self as when one is glorifying. Act of glorification. The fact is that not to glorify God, and that is true in all religions, one attributes to God qualities. One says he is majestic, he's all-powerful, he's compassionate and merciful, and so on. All the wazifas we use in the Sufis are those qualities that we ascribe to God. And as he mildly says, since we know him through ourselves, we attribute to him all those qualities that we know in ourselves. So we imagine God within our own personal conception. The fact is that by projecting these qualities upon God that one imagines God to be, one awakens these qualities in oneself. And therefore, prayer is the most creative of all acts. So now, Pir is describing what he himself is experiencing in prayer. The faithful does not only pray to God, but he prays before God and in the presence of God. See, that's the difference. You're not praying to God. You feel the presence of God. You're there in the presence of God. Once the imagination has helped man to bring the presence of God before him, so it's an active imagination. Let's say we are the product of the divine imagination, and in the end, the imagination in us imagines God. So now once the imagination has helped man to bring the presence of God before him, the God in his own heart is awakened. You see, by imagining that you're sitting there or kneeling in the presence of God, somehow you awaken God in your heart. When he is praying in the room, he is not alone. He is there with God. Therefore, God to him is not in the highest heaven, but next to him, before him, and in him. No one to him is then so living as God, and so intelligible as God. And the names and forms before him are all covered under him. Every word of prayer not only brings him blessing, but also brings blessing to all those around him. And I think this is the ultimate when he says, but if this imagination is become a reality, then exactly as one feels for one's earthly beloved, sympathy, love, and attachment, so one must feel the same for God. So perhaps it's time now for us to have a break and continue. So, what I suggest is that those of you who want to you have to go to the toilet or whatever, want fresh air or whatever, stay and go. And those who'd like to just stay on, we're going to listen to some very beautiful music. And don't make the break too long, because as you see, this is the foundation of the teaching. It's the most important thing. And so we have very little time for it. 10 minutes? Yeah.
10 minuten pauze. Probeer zo rustig mogelijk. Sorry dat het zo strikt wordt, maar anders geeft het probleem. Wie geen bonnetje heeft, dat hij geen bonnetje heeft, betekent dat hij in de laatste groep zit. meditatie van Pir Zade is opgenomen en jullie kunnen aan het eind van vandaag die tape dus volgen.
Ja, ze moet het, als je het opgeeft zodanig, in de pauze, dan er is een duplicator hier. Dan kun je die aan het eind van de middag op de vrijdag doen.
Ja, spijt mij dat wij hebben zo weinig tijd. We hebben alleen een half uur, want u moet natuurlijk eten. Ik moet eten en ook slapen. Dat is het. En zo ieder minuut is zo belangrijk. Zo. See, somehow Pir Murshid's ideas are very, very bold, very new. And I think that it helps us to see the message in our time. It has been incubated since the past, but still it has a very definite contribution to our time. And so what Pir Murshid is emphasizing is the initiative of the person, while not forgetting the divine background, but somehow the impact, not only the impact of the totality on each part, but the impact of each part on the totality. And so that's very heartening for us, because otherwise we feel like the old-fashioned idea, God wished it, and so I do it because God wished it, and you know, all these arguments that come into those misconceptions that have caused the terrible events of September 11th. Misconception. Take responsibility instead of saying, oh, God wished it. So some of these ideas, I remember there was at the time, there was a philosopher called Mr. Hoyak, and he was really amazed by them. He said, Pir Murshid, didn't you really believe it? Did you mean that? Yes, Murshid, yes. Oh, yes, it's quite different to what we've been thinking so far. So, two things. One is the divine mind becomes completed after manifestation. That's a very new, very novel idea. The Creator's mind is made of his own creation. The experience of every soul becomes the experience of the divine mind. Divinity, the word divinity is used, one thinks of God coming into existence as man, that is the meaning of divinity. Divinity resides in humanity. It is also the outcome of humanity. So that's what Moshe means by make God a reality. Making God a reality instead of just up there. What is more, Pir Murshid had a sense of what people are beginning to discover more and more, that is global thinking. We're thinking about global warming, but global thinking. That is that somehow, well, I'll read Moshe's words, the thought of any person is a thought of the entire human race. And so the intelligence of the whole planet has an effect upon all those living in the planet. Now one could say, yes, it's coming through, not through everyone, of course, only a few people, but still somehow there's a way of thinking in our time which is not the same as the way people thought 200 years ago. We think differently. And that was a problem for me because, you know, I'm at a stage now when Muslims ask me, people ask me, you're talking about the unity of all religions, but, there are things in the Quran that, for example, the Quran says, slay the heathen, so, you know, can you be for that or not? And so then we are challenged, you know, talk about the respect of all religions. It says sometimes if you're attacked, then you can defend yourself, although Christ said to your cheek. But so that's a law for the eye for the eye and tooth for the tooth. You find in Judaism, so it's but slay the heathens. That so the fact is that one has to see things in their historical context. And that's what, when I'm discussing with Muslims, they say, no, the Quran is eternal. No, I think that religion changes with time. And that is the message of our time. It's a way of looking at things different. It has been incubated by the past, but it's different, it's new. And this gives us such a wonderful feeling that this is it now. We're working for the spirituality of the future. We don't have to be tied up by the past. So Moshe was a pioneer. Moshe said the soul is God, but man has a body and mind of his own. Now that, of course, a lot of religious people would be rather shocked by that. But then he says it more precisely when he says man has a will of his own that is not apart from the divine will. And that's what it is that somehow, and that is why it requires a wholly different way of thinking. Instead of thinking God up there and us here, somehow that relationship between us, somehow that our will is, as Pir said, is like a branch of a tree. So it's not the tree, but still it is a tree. So to be able to reconcile irreconciliables. So our will is not apart from the divine will, but still we do somehow have some influence upon the divine will. And that word came very strongly in Ibn Arabi. Ibn Arabi was one of the most progressive of all the Sufi metaphysicians of the past. And many of the words, let's say they were incubated in the teachings of the ancient Sufis. That's why we call ourselves Sufis. So what Ibn Arabi says is that his servants, that is, we as a servant of God, our properties exercise their influence upon God. He only determines their properties through them. He does not determine our properties except through us. Or rather, we determine our own properties through ourselves, though through God. So that relationship is very subtle. It's not like God up there and us here. It's somehow that relationship, and that is today, of course, in science is called the holistic paradigm. this kind of picture that we make of heaven is somehow linked with our sense of light. A world of light. And I think that the practices of light are the ones that will help us to discover our body of light. And that is a condition for resurrecting. There are many levels of light. We've been doing a lot of practice at light in my seminars. Pir Moshe says, we are the instruments whereby we make the inner light radiant. The inner light is all-pervading, as Pir Moshe says, but we can be instrumental in making it radiant. Otherwise it's just all-pervading. And I'll end with the words of, I think it was Ibn Arabi, but it could be a lot of Sufis have said that. When you think of God, the light of God is in your eyes. When you think of God, the light of God is in your eyes. So it's no use just trying to visualize light. It's a question of purifying one's thoughts so that one's thoughts are luminous, and purifying one's emotions so that one's emotions are luminous.